In today's video, we are going to be making the disappearing 9 patch, and I have to say, I think this is probably one of my favourite quilt blocks. Hi everybody, this is Tom, the Colourblind Quilter here, and in today's video we are making block number 6 in our Behind the Blocks series. We are making a sampler quilt with 12 blocks out of squares and rectangles, and this is helping us to build our skills as quilters. Now with every block there is a free worksheet on how to make this block with step-by-step instructions and diagrams, as well as how to make the block in other sizes. If you're following along and you want to make the entire sampler quilt, you can get a worksheet with all the fabric requirements and all the cutting instructions so that you can make the entire quilt. If you've missed any of the videos in this series so far, I will pop a link in the corner so that you can catch up with the playlist. And also, if you want to colour your own version of the sampler quilt, you can click the link in the description below for Prequilt, and that will allow you to play with fabrics and colours for free, and you can decide how you want your sampler quilt to look. The disappearing 9 patch is one of my favourite quilt blocks. I love how it turns out, and I've seen so many variations of quilts using this with clever colours and clever placements that give some stunning secondary patterns and effects. It really is just such fun to play with this one. And again, like the disappearing 4 patch, it looks complicated, but I promise you it's so easy to make. And without further ado, let's dive on in. So I have gone for 2 colours plus a background in this block, and it gives me that lovely secondary effect. So to make this block, you are going to need one 4 3/4 inch square in fabric A for the centre of the 9 patch. You're going to need 4 4 3/4 inch squares in fabric B, which is the blue fabric, and then you're going to need 4 4 3/4 squares in the background. And in my case, this is white. This is based on a simple 9 patch, and if you need a refresher on how to make a 9 patch, there'll be a link in the description below, but we are going to very quickly run through it just now. We begin by laying out our squares in the arrangement of the 9 patch, and make sure that the red square is in the centre. And then you're going to place the first column right sides together, and we're going to join these with a careful 1/4 inch seam. I like to use a leader at the sewing machine to catch any tension issues or any thread balls, and then I am chain piecing these through. You can pin these if you like, or you can sew and adjust as you go. And once you're finished, just cut the pieces apart and back to the pressing station. We're going to press the top row towards the blue, the middle row towards the red, and the bottom row towards the blue so that our seams will nest. And then lay these out in order and place the final column right sides together, and then we're going to attach these again with a 1/4 inch seam. Again at the sewing machine with a leader, just chain piece these through. Do feel free to pin if you like. Once you've finished sewing these together, you are just going to cut them apart, and then we are going to head to the pressing mat to get these seams nice and crisp. Again, press the top row towards the blue, press the middle row towards the red, and then press the bottom row towards the blue again. And arrange these back in the 9 patch, placing the first and second rows right sides together. You need to make sure that these seams match so that we get nice crisp corners. Join these seams together. You may like to pin your seams to ensure that they don't move around, otherwise you can just adjust them as you're sewing them. Take your time and get it nice and crisp. And then once you're on the pressing board, we are going to press the seams towards the top of the block. So flatten out with your fingers, make sure the seams are going in the right direction, and press with the iron. Place the 3rd row onto the bottom and make sure that those seams are nesting nicely. And again, feel free to pin these to make sure they don't move, and then sew them on through, making sure that they are nested as you pass over them. Also watch out that that stitch plate doesn't push the seams in the wrong direction on the bottom. Finally, press that row towards the bottom of the block, make sure it's nice and flat, and that is the 9 patch constructed, and you can see the seams are going all in the opposite directions and nesting. Now, we are going to measure the middle square, which comes out on mine is 4 1/4 inches, so we need to make a cut 2 1/8 inch from that first long seam. We make 2 cuts, one vertically and one horizontally, essentially cutting the block in half in both directions. Turn your cutting mat or move your body 90 degrees for the second cut, and then rearrange the pieces as shown in the video, and then place them right sides together and head back to the sewing machine. There are no seams to nest on this, so just pin if you like, or just adjust as you go, and then join these together, chain piecing both pieces. Again, just make sure that those seams on the bottom don't get caught in the seam plate and it pushes them in the wrong direction. And then cut these apart and head to the pressing board. On the top row, we are pressing the seam to the right, and on the bottom row, we are pressing the seam to the left so that these center seams will nest. Place them right sides together and make sure that center seam nests. It's the only seam that has to nest, so you can place a pin in it if you need to, and then join these together, making sure that that center seam is nicely nested. And you can see I'm just adjusting as I go. And then once we're finished, we are going to press that seam towards the top of the block. Make sure it's nice and flat so that it's nice and crisp, and then use your iron to give the block a good press, as we are now going to trim this to size. We want this block to be 12.5 inches, and it's just a tiny little bit bigger. So what you're going to do is take your ruler. This is a 12.5 inch square ruler. So we're going to make sure that the 6.25 inch lines are matching the center seams on this. And once you've lined it up, you're going to trim the right side and the top side, and just make sure that it's nice and straight before you cut. And then once you've done that, you're going to rotate the block 90 degrees, and this time you're going to again make sure that the 6.25 inch line lines up vertically and horizontally in the center seam, but also the bottom of the block is lined up square with your 12.5 inch line on your ruler. Cut that, and then that is your finished block. So that was the disappearing 9 patch, and as I promised you, it's dead easy to make, but it looks amazing. And there are so many things to play with the colours and the placements to create secondary pattern. So let's take a look at a couple of the quilts that you could potentially make using this block. So in this first example, I have arranged these blocks to give a kind of stepped effect. So what you can see is that the red squares are all running diagonally across the quilt, and it gives the feeling of stairs walking down to the left and down to the right, and I think that's really nice. You can also see there's a secondary pattern in places appearing where there is blue center squares with white and red outside them. I really like this. I added 2 borders to this, a thin blue border to frame the quilt so that the center top kind of floats, and then I added a grey border on the outside with blue cornerstones, and I think this looks really nice and it's really effective, and I like the movement in this quilt. And I think that with quilting with diagonal crosshatch, or even quilting straight horizontal and vertical lines with this, would be a really nice effect against that pattern. Now for the second design, we've gone a little bit modern here, and I have used the magic quads feature of Prequilt to create this, and what it does is it's randomly placed things to create a pattern, and as you can see, it's actually created that kind of center motif where there are the 4 blue and the 4 red, so there's a kind of center square, and then everything else is kind of randomly placed around the outside. And it's actually quite cool the way that this has worked out, given that it's completely randomly done by a computer. So I really like this, and again, I've added the thin blue border just to frame things nicely, and I think that it's very modern and it's very effective, and I actually think I'm going to be making this quilt very soon. I love it so much. I think it's really cool. You could also play with this quilt by changing the 9 patch that you start with. So you could take away some of the blue squares and replace them with a third colour. You could put green in here, or you could replace some of the white squares with grey squares. And then once you've cut the block in half horizontally and vertically, you could play with the rotation of the blocks to give you some different effects. There are many things that you can do with this block, playing with the colours in the 9 patch, playing with the rotations when you sew it back together, and then playing with the rotations of the layout of the blocks before you finish the quilt top. So those quilts, I hope you liked them. I think they're great and I can't wait to make one of them. It's been a while since I made one of these quilts. Don't forget, there are 2 free worksheets in the description below. One is the step-by-step instructions for this block, and the other one is all the fabric and cutting instructions required to make the entire sampler quilt. You can also head to the link to Prequilt to colour your sampler quilt to make it your own, and it's free, there's no cost. Please share your progress on Instagram using the hashtag BTBSeason1 so that I can follow along with everything that you're making, and be sure to tag the Colourblind Quilter. In the next video, we are going to be making a log cabin. This is a fun and easy block to make, and when it comes to laying these out in a quilt, there are so many possibilities. It's so much fun, and I'm going to have lots to show you. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you want to know when the next video in the series comes out, be sure to subscribe and click that bell so that you get notified. And until next time, take care.